Today, we are hearing the success story of a client turned friend named Bridgette, and I cannot wait for you to hear it because she drops gold nuggets all the way through this episode. She shares how she was kind of struggling for a year with unexplained infertility, what she tried, what worked, because hint, hint, wink, wink, she is pregnant, and also drops some really, really good, quotable statements about faith and obedience and what she really had to learn through her fertility journey. So I encourage you to listen to this entire episode and take notes and let it sink into your heart because this could be true for you too. Welcome to the Fruitful Fertility Co podcast, your holistic, faith-filled, no-fluff guide to getting pregnant naturally. I'm your host and TTC BFF, Tori Black, here to pull you out of your weariness and cheer you into God's calling to be a mother, all while giving you the simple, bite-sized steps to improve your fertility. Let's trade stress and overwhelm for hope, because girl, you look fertile to me. Okay, guys, we have a very special guest today. Bridgette is one of the students of Fruitful Fertility Co. And so, Bridgette, thank you so much for being here and tell us a little bit about your fertility story.
Okay, so first of all, I am 32 and my husband is 36. And to start off with, I have a 9-year-old stepson. When my husband and I started dating, Chase was about 4 at the time. And so I've been a part of his life for about 5 years now. My husband and I got married September of 2023, and we wanted to wait about a year after we got married to start trying to get pregnant. We had just bought a house. We were renovating the whole house, living with my in-laws, doing all that. And so we wanted to just kind of get settled in, do all those things, and then, start trying. So I would say it was probably like August of 2024, which would have, if we would have got pregnant that first month, it would have put us, pregnant right at a year of being married. So we were fine with that. So that was kind of our plan from the get-go. I had been on, when I was in high school, I was on the depot shot for birth control for a really long time. And I learned that that was not good for you. So I was off it really most of my, in my 20s. And then I got back on birth control when, the pill, when Seth and I started dating. But then it was February of the year we were planning to get married. I started using natural cycles. I kind of did a deep dive into how birth control affects your hormones and those kind of things. And so I wanted to do a more, natural approach. And so I was on the Natural Cycles app. And just like at that time, there's an option where you can do prevent pregnancy, where it tells you when you're fertile and you just use other forms of protection, or you just skip, completely so that you don't get pregnant. And so I was doing that until about August of that year. And then I switched it to, you can switch it to planning for pregnancy. And so it's basically the opposite of what you were just doing. So we started trying, and we both were really normal in terms of health. We work out regularly, we, eat pretty healthy, get a lot of protein in. We've just always been active. So we didn't really start doing anything extra other than I was taking a prenatal vitamin. So that was and he took a men's multivitamin. So that was basically it. But after probably 3 or 4 months, we were just, frustrated. We were discouraged. We felt maybe it wasn't God's plan for us because there was, people around us were getting pregnant. They weren't even trying, or they were trying. And, that worked for them and it didn't work for us. And so I would say probably 7, 8 months in of us trying, we went ahead and Seth we did the at-home semen analysis, and all those levels came back good. So, we kind of ruled that out. And then I was kind of nervous about going to an OB just because I knew from, your course and listening to your podcast and all that, that they want you to wait until you've been trying for a year, and that, they're just going to put me on like Clomid or Letrozole or
Mhm.
whatever
Mhm.
that's called. And,
Yep.
they're just going to be like, well, no, let's, try these pills and see if it works. And I just didn't want to go that route. So I, kind of avoided it for quite a while. And I did go to the OB in July of this year because it had been almost right at a year. And he wanted my husband to go to a fertility clinic to get tested. And I explained to him we kind of already did that home one, but he was still kind of a little bit pushy about it. And it was also going to be like $350. And I'm like, well, we already spent like $100 on that at
Mhm.
home one. And I felt like we did that. So that part, I felt like was just, going around in circles. And then he wanted me to check my progesterone levels on like day 21 or whatever of that cycle. And I had told him I had done a nido, my
Mhm.
numbers looked fine. I'm like, I can pull up the numbers for you if that helps. And that was just like, he was kind of dismissive of the things we had tried and was just wanting us to kind of do them again, is what I felt like. And so I, kind of did not want to do that. And then we'll figure out that later. But yeah, so that was July of this year that I went to the OB, and then you'll find out what happened in July later on. But so that's, we didn't have to go that route. But I was wanting kind of more to get an HSG done just to make sure, because you talk about that, and what it is, and that's kind of a step, especially if it had been a year. And the OB I saw was more like he wanted us to do those other things first and then do an HSG. And I was kind of like, I'm just ready to try this because I feel like we've already tried that. And so it was kind of a frustrating appointment.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's the things that we had tried on our own. I was tracking all the days and doing all
Mhm.
the things and coming up with not a lot. So
That is a very common story that I hear, and this is like it's funny because this is a Christian fertility podcast, but I tell people all the time, just lie when you go in there. Like
yeah.
they don't know if you've been trying for a year or not because they will if you tell them that you've only been trying 5 months, 4 months, they will make you wait. But if you go in there and say, I've been trying a year, they'll go ahead and do all the things. But it is very frustrating when like you said, like I've been tracking my hormones. We did do some testing, like we've already done these things, which is so smart because and I know Bridget, but for anyone listening, if you are not pregnant, if you're tracking your cycles and you're pretty, good at identifying your fertile window and you're not pregnant by month 4, it's time to start looking. We're not going to wait a year because that is so heartbreaking to wait a year and not know what's wrong, to not find where the kink is and just fix it. So good for you for advocating for yourself and being like, hey, we've kind of already done this stuff. But it is kind of, I always say, like, consider the source and
Hmm.
what they sell. So if you go to a fertility clinic, they have a system and they want you to go through their system. And it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't mean to like put down fertility clinics because of course they've helped plenty of people, but it is frustrating when you've already been proactive and you are being an advocate for yourself, or you have done something like listen to a podcast that's already given you all those pieces and be like, no, 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 I've already done that. Let's do
Hmm.
something else. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So yeah, you're definitely not alone in that. I feel like people are very frustrated. And that's even like a big part of I try to like keep my mouth shut, but one thing I want to say to people is like, let me help you before you wait a year and then you're really frustrated because they're not going to help you.
Yeah.
It's like
And
you're
and something else I did is this was after I had found you and I started in the course and all that, but I did go and get a lot of tests run, like blood drawn, and and that was through my primary care provider.
Mhm.
And she was super cool about testing anything I wanted to test. I took
Yeah.
that big list you have in there and she was fine
Mhm.
with it. She was actually helping me figure out symptoms to get insurance to cover some of them,
Yeah.
and that type of stuff. And so my primary care was very open about doing that when I told her, why we were doing it. And so it just was, a little disheartening that then when I had to switch and,
Mm.
go to an OB, that he wasn't as open as she was. So,
Yeah, what an amazing primary care physician. And I feel like that's truly half the battle is just getting a doctor that will listen to you.
yeah.
Because that's what I try to remind people, even in that, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but the course that Bridgette did is called Conception Connection. And inside that course, I give you a fertility labs cheat sheet. So, like, if I could draw labs on you, these are the labs I would draw. And so, what Bridgette is saying is she took that lab sheet to her primary care physician and she was actually open to doing it. Sometimes I have clients that take that sheet in and their doctor won't do it. And it's just like I think personally, I don't know, but I think it's a power struggle of like, no, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. But the truth is, your medical providers work for you. And so you just have to kind of get a little, you have to get strong-willed and be like, no, and advocate for yourself. So that's really good. I'm glad you did that. What about, so tell me, how did you find me? Because at this point, you're trying for 3 or 4 months and then 7 to 8 months, somewhere in that window, you found me, right? So how did
Yeah,
you find me?
I was trying to remember. I think it was about maybe March, February or March. Um, and I don't know how it happened. I think I was just like Googling fertility podcasts or something,
Hmm.
and then my world collided with your world, and I had been listening, and then in one of your podcasts you had said, give my podcast a review. I'm doing this giveaway to this
Hmm.
Conception Connection group. And I was like, well, I like the podcast, so I might as well just give it a review and
Yeah.
try it. And so I did, and I was the winner. So I got access to Conception Connection through the giveaway. And so that's how I found you.
Yeah, that's so neat. I remember that so clearly too, like messaging, like being so excited to message you and be like, Bridgette, you're my winner. You know, it was really cool. So yes, for anyone, I do giveaways like that. I try to do them at least once a year, if not more. But I do that with reviews on the podcast because the reviews help the podcast grow and reach new people. So if you're listening right now and you have not left a review, please do so because that is very, very helpful. But yeah, so you won access to Conception Connection, which is an online course. I'll also have this in the show notes for anybody listening. And so you were probably in there. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Conception Connection and like what you learned from it or what you implemented, that kind of things. Like, what did you think about it?
So I enjoyed it. It was she gave out the material like weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. I'm the kind of person that would have just tried to do it all at once, so
That's
that helped me a
exactly
lot.
why I do it that way because I
Um,
know because I'm one of those too. You would railroad through it and then not
yeah,
actually do the pieces because you would just read the information and keep going. But that's
yeah.
exactly why I did it that way.
So the first part was more about learning, more about implementing. There was like these little R's that you use, but I don't
Yes.
remember. One was restore, but I don't remember all the other ones.
Yes.
But so just learning at the beginning, how our, basically how our bodies work and that type of stuff, and what's kind of going on and what the issues can be, and that was helpful. Because I took uh like I forgot what it was called, like health classes or whatever about
Yeah.
back in high school, but that was a long time ago and we don't
Yeah.
remember that, and they don't get into that details
They don't.
about that stuff. Child development, so because it talks about you know people getting pregnant and then how children develop and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, so I liked the learning part at the beginning, and then also, like, she assigned us accountability partners at the time, and shout out to Megan because Megan was amazing. I still talk to me, not as much now, but I still chat, every couple weeks with Megan, check in, see how things are going for her. And that was nice because, a lot of times this space is not talked about enough and you feel like you're alone. And a lot of times people don't have other people in their life that know, what they're going through. They may, sympathize with you, but they don't have empathy because they haven't experienced it themselves. And so being with a group of people who were going through the same thing was really helpful. And then there were some things, walking, which I had already heard
Mhm.
from the podcast, that walking was like such a big, like it helps,
Everything.
everything.
I call it a
And
powerhouse because it
yeah,
it helps
and
everything.
so it might have been even before I started conception connection, that's a hard one, that I would listen to the podcast and I would be walking like around the
Mhm.
block at my house, so I did walking. I still walk now. I probably walk more now than I did when I was going through conception connection. But walking was like such a big thing that I implemented because I work a desk job. So I sit, I still work out in the evenings, but 45 minutes of movement when you have sat in a chair all day is not enough to be what it needs to be. And so, and there were a lot of things that I didn't make it to try per se.
Mhm.
Like there was the castor oil packs that you had talked about, and I bought the stuff, but I never actually
Yeah.
followed through with it, which happens sometimes. But overall, I feel like that gave me more of a blueprint to use
Mhm.
for steps that I could be taking. Um, than even going to the doctor because they gave me nothing. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I am a checklist person. I love a checklist. I love not guessing, not trying to figure it out. And so the course is built off like a checklist you can print to implement into your daily routine. So instead of spending so much time on Google and Chat GPT trying to figure it out or going to doctor's appointments where you're just dismissed, you're like, okay, I have a plan. I don't have to overthink it. I don't have to use any energy. Here is literally the blueprint. That's the
yeah,
perfect word for it. And it even used to be called, when I first launched that course, it was called Boost Your Fertility Blueprint because that's exactly what it is. It's a
yeah.
blueprint. So that's really
And
cool.
and within the group, so we talked about the lab sheet earlier. I got all those labs drawn, which I had never had my blood drawn before that. And they were like, we have to take 8 vials of your blood. And I was
It
like
is a
scared
lot.
to death. But it was fine. Like the phlebotomist that I had was great. So it was fine. But I did learn, which for a long time my hair has just I've shed a lot of hair on my head. And I knew like that something was probably like imbalanced because there's no way the amount of hair that I lose is normal. And
Yeah.
now for me right now, it's probably going to get worse. But I have very low vitamin D levels, is what I had learned. And also, when I did it, I think it was like March or April. So, like, I wasn't getting outside quite as much, which also affects it. But they were, I learned that. And so I was able to start taking, trying to get outside more without
Mm-hmm.
sunglasses on, which I think is something that you had said in one of your
Mm-hmm.
podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And and I also started taking like a vitamin D supplement. So that was, something I did learn from the labs. Everything else seemed like, it was fine, but those levels were really low. So, and I'm like a big milk drinker.
Yeah.
I have milk in my coffee. I, do all the things. I eat a lot of foods that have vitamin D, but it was just still really low. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's so handy to have that sheet and see, like, even because I think that sheet correlates to, like, it tells you what lab to have drawn, what normal is, what optimal is, and like how it correlates to fertility.
yeah.
When you have a doctor, and all they do is run labs and then tell you everything's fine and sends it home, you still have a sheet that tells you.
Yeah.
And I think it even has a tip in that chart that says, like, here's one thing you can do to boost that level. So I'm glad that was so handy. That's so good to know. So you were in Conception Connection for a few months, right? And then
Mhm.
at some point you started taking Rise and Source.
Yes.
So these are for if you are new to the podcast, these are the supplements I recommend as fertility supplements. They're not typical or branded fertility supplements, but I see them work better than any fertility supplement I've ever used. So that's why I recommend them. But tell us a little bit about that. So you were doing Conception Connection, doing all the walking, implementing all the steps, and then started Rise and Source. So tell us,
Yes.
like, remind us a timeline. Like, you found me, you started Conception Connection. How long, when you started Conception Connection, how long had you been trying? How long were you in Conception Connection? And then when did you start Rise and Source? Kind of
Okay. So we
timeline.
started trying around August of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found you around like February or March. And then I
2025,
think,
right?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
And then I think um I won not long after that, I think,
Yeah, I
when
think it was
Conception
March.
Connection. Yeah, March. And then because we couldn't do all the course at once. So I had to wait until, we were finished or whatever with
Yes.
it. And then I think it was pretty close to the end of it or one of the last few weeks when you started talking about Rise and Source.
Okay.
So I think the first month I did Rise and Source was May, I think.
Okay.
May and June. No, it was June. Sorry, it was June.
Okay.
So you had been talking about it, and you were doing like a test group kind of thing where you were like, oh, if you're, I need, if anybody's willing to try this, I'll give you, this money back in exchange for, your thoughts about it. And,
Mm-hmm.
you were doing research trying to figure
Yeah.
out if this was something you wanted to recommend. So at that time I was taking a prenatal, which is still the one I take, but it's three pills because it's through Thorn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was taking the vitamin D, and then I had done an HTMA or a mineral analysis or whatever. But a lot of that was I was trying to figure out why my hair was shedding so much.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a way you can do that. And I think I might have done that before I got my blood drawn. I don't know. That part is a little, I don't remember which happened first. But so some of those levels were low, or I don't, that the test was results that I did is not the one through Tori, but it was hard to read, hard to understand. It was not great. So that one, yeah, it was confusing. But what I thought looked low on that thing, I bought some supplements for. So I was taking a couple extra on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking a lot of vitamins and whatever at that time. And you were like, hey, you can just drink this, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't try it without taking all of the vitamins that you're taking and see what happens. And I was like, oh, well, sign me up, because I already didn't like taking pills to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, a lot that I was taking on top of that. And so I started taking it in June, and I would say, I mean, at first I didn't really like the taste of the lemonade, and then Tori's like, add a little bit of sugar, and I was like, now you're speaking my language. And then I loved it, and I was like, okay, if I can put a teaspoon of sugar in this, and it is great. The source, which is like the mushroom, whatever that stuff is, I don't think there's any way to make that taste
Is
good.
the other way. The rise is the mushroom powder that's the mango lemonade flavor.
Yes,
The
yes,
source is the black drops that
yes.
are they're trace minerals. So they taste very ocean watery because it's just minerals.
Yeah, that was something I was like, okay, you got to take this like a shot. You can't sip this thing. You just got to get it down. But so that one, not as enjoyable. But I'm like, if I can just drink this and not, do all the pills, it's fine. So I did that in June, and my cycle is normally around like 32 days. It was on the longer side of, what's the range anyways. But that month, my cycle was like, I looked back to look because I couldn't remember. I knew it was longer. It was like 37 days.
Hmm.
And I sent Tori a message, and I was like, I think something's wrong. Like, what's happening? Like, I don't know what's going on. Because that month I had started doing Anito, I think, or maybe the month before, and I had never had a cycle that was that long. And so I was just like very confused. But so I also started using Anito around the same time. And, that's, I figured out that my cycle was so long, and I didn't notice like a ton of difference that month other than my cycle being longer.
Hmm.
And then, so you did the promo for the month, and then the next month came around and it was July. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this again. Like, I already
I
have
remember.
because I had already bought all the pills. So I'd already spent
Yep.
all the money. Like, my HSA was drained by like mid-year, and, uh, but you were like, well, I would recommend you still do it, if you can, because obviously it was working. If your cycle was lengthened, it was trying to work out the imbalances and work on
Hmm.
your system and all that. And so I went ahead and did another month, and so that would have been July. And around July, that's when I kind of felt like God was speaking to me and just telling me, like, basically I felt like I was trying to control everything, and I was trying to do too much, like I'm
Hmm.
tracking, I'm doing all the things, and it was just like, and my husband had said that to me like a couple months ago. He was like, you're just trying to control every little detail of this. And he was like, this is just creating more stress on you, on
Hmm.
me, on the process. And so, um, So I was like, okay, and I was a little frustrated because I just bought all these Anito strips, and then I was like, and I went back and forth. Honestly, I was like wrestling with, do I track? Do I not track? Do I feel like I'm supposed to? What if, if I don't, then what if we miss a month? And
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, yeah, I was just kind of fixated on the numbers and getting them perfect and the timing and all these kind of things, and so in July, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna track. I'm just gonna, just see what happens basically. And so I still was doing natural cycles, just because you take your temperature every day with that, and just it was my normal routine. That didn't create any not extra stress for me like
Yeah.
Anita did. So I had went ahead and ordered the Rise and Source for July, and I was taking it, and this was kind of towards mid-July or whatever. But we were planning to go on a family trip to Colorado. So I looked at my Natural Cycles app, and of course, ovulation week was the week we were going to be gone in Colorado. And so um that was just like extra stress on top of that, because then I felt like, okay, we're going to miss a week because we're going on a family vacation, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was just little stressed about that, but I just had to remember, like, if we skip a month or miss a month, like, it's not, the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was good. I took my Rise and Source with me, and I took a little shaker bottle, and I was still drinking it, and it has some caffeine in it too. And so that was kind of a little, afternoon. I mean, I don't think it has a ton, but it was just kind of like my afternoon drink or
Yeah.
whatever, and I enjoyed it at that time, after I was adding some sugar to it.
Yeah.
So it was good then. So I think around then, like, was when my husband kind of was like, what is our plan? Like, we kind of sat down and had a, like, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to keep trying? Are we going to, try IUI, try something else? Like, we did not have the funds for, like, really going into a lot of that stuff because it gets really expensive.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of like, we had put a timeline per se on it, I guess. We were going to try until the end of this year and then figure out what our next step was. So, that gave me like a little bit of peace of mind, because I'm like, okay, if it doesn't happen by then, we'll figure it out. And like, it had to come to an end because like what we were doing was really stressful,
Yeah.
and I think I was honestly making it worse because I was the hyper fixation on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went on our trip, and um on that trip, one of the evenings, I don't, why do kids love to swim in hotel pools? That I don't understand. So every night, it didn't matter. The hotel pool was not great, but every night my stepson wanted to get in this hotel pool and whatever. And he didn't want to swim alone. So my husband got in with him, and I'm like, no, I'm not getting in that pool. Like, there is no
Good.
reason for me to swim in this pool. Um, and he asked me to get in the hot tub with him, and I was like, and the first thought, which this is bad, but this is how my brain was wired at the time, was I had done, I had read and heard and whatever that it's not good for fertility to be in a hot tub because men or women, because it affects, your system and gets everything heated up and, whatever. I
Yes.
think there is like some science behind it or whatever.
Yeah.
So my first thought was, I was like, and then my husband was like, oh, come on, and trying to talk me into it. And I was like, Seth, like, I'm not, like, it's not good for everything, to do that. And so I didn't get in. And then it was maybe the next day or the day after that. And we had climbed what's called the Manitou Incline or something. And it's like 3,600 steps that go like straight up, and it's like this crazy thing. And after that, my legs were sore. And so my stepson, again, that night, he was like, oh, it's our last night here, just get in the hot tub. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get in the hot tub because that's what I want to do. And
Didn't you message me?
say that again.
Didn't you message me? I feel like maybe unless somebody else just had a very similar story, I feel like maybe you messaged me and you're like, "Can I get in the hot tub?"
Oh, I probably did.
And I was like, yeah,
Because
girl, get in the hot
yeah,
tub.
yeah, and because I was living with my first thought was, well, what if what if this is affecting my fertility?
Hmm.
And I had to let go of that fear because I was like, you know what, I'm not tracking this month. I
Hmm.
feel like I'm just supposed to, take a break for a little while, and so I got in the hot tub. And it was awesome, and I'm so glad that I did it because who doesn't love a hot tub?
Yeah.
So fast. Do you want me to keep going or?
Yeah, I just remember, I also remember, I was going to say, I remember when your period got off track because I was doing that, like you said, doing that little research because I don't ever want to just take, like, I don't ever want to suggest something without trying it or understanding it or knowing it. So I was like, I had been researching Rise and Source and really loved the research behind it. But again, they're not fertility supplements, but I still was like, these still address all the fertility issues. So, like you said, we did the research group. I had, wanted about 10 people to try it and let me know. And I remember you in that group being like, this really threw my period off and like being frustrated. Like, I remember you being like, and understandably so, because at this point
Yeah.
you had tried so many things and been like, now I've tried these supplements you suggested, and now my period's all jacked up, and I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? And I don't ever like to be pushy, but I was like, okay, Bridget, I want you, I'm actually excited about this because I can't give you the science behind it, but I swear almost every time I have a client start a protocol, their period gets really weird at some point. Sometimes the first month, sometimes not till like 3 months in. And it almost never fails that after their period gets weird, the next month or two is when they get pregnant. Because
Yeah.
it's like the body's trying to reassess and recalibrate and find its new balance. And it's starting to actually feel safe and feel the effects of what we're doing. And then all of a sudden they're pregnant. So I was actually excited that your period was all messed up. But you were very frustrated, understandably so.
Yeah.
I was just like, I was like, I know you're frustrated, but please do this one more month. I was like, if nothing else, please do this one more month because the nice thing about Rise and Source from Frequence too is it's a 30-day money back guarantee. You spend the money, you hate it, you get every penny back.
Yeah.
I was like, it's kind of like a win-win situation, like, or maybe not win-win, but like it's not lose-lose. Like if you don't like it, it doesn't work, you get your money back. But if it does work and I am right on this hunch that I have, big win,
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you did message me and ask if you could get in the hot tub. And one thing that I try to bring people back to is like to assess the things that you're asking or thinking with the question of is this fear-based or is this faith-based? Because anything fear-based is not from the Lord.
Yeah.
Anything fear like Second Timothy, oh gosh, I'm terrible at getting the right scriptures. So I'm not even going to make it up. It's in Second Timothy somewhere. The scripture about for God has given us oh my gosh, I'm about to mess it up. God has given us a spirit of power, love, and sound mind. Like fear, he does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. It's that spirit.
Yeah.
So I tell people like if it's fear, it's not from the Lord because the Bible literally tells us God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of sound mind.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I remember saying, go get in that hot tub. If you were
Yeah.
getting in a hot tub every single day, and this is something for everyone listening, when you do have these fearful, like, oh, I can't do that because I'm trying to get pregnant, I can't get in the hot tub. What you do every day matters 10 times more than what you do every once in a while. If you have a hot tub at your house and you and your husband are getting in your hot tub every single night before you get in bed, maybe we don't need to do that. You're on vacation having fun with your family and you want to get in the hot tub, we're going to get in the hot tub.
Yeah.
So I remember having that conversation with you and being like, yes, girl, go get in the hot tub.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
breathe. But yeah, so that was what month was the family vacation?
So family vacation was July, so towards
July.
the end of July.
Okay. And so then what
Um,
happened? Tell us what happened in August.
okay, so when we got back from Colorado a few days later, it was my birthday. But we did a lot of like fishing and that kind of stuff this summer, and so we went fishing a couple more times. We went out to dinner for my birthday, and we did all these things, because summer was coming to an end. My husband and my stepson were going back to school because my husband is an administrator. Um, And actually, back in June, I had visited my grandma. So this is just like a little tidbit in there. But my grandma is like um, the reason why I'm still a Christian today. Like she took me and my sister to church her and my grandpa did when we were younger. Wednesdays, Sundays, anytime the church was open and there was something going on for kids or youth, like her and my grandpa would always take us. So she's like one of the godliest people I know. Like, if you want somebody to pray for you, you ask my grandma. And so I went and visited her, and, she had asked me, well, are you and Seth going to have a baby? And I was like, well, and I kind of, told her we were trying and all that. And first thing she was like, well, have you been praying about it? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, grandma, I've been praying about it, And she's the type of person where she probably started praying before I left her house, like that was just, she's just that kind of person. And so on my birthday, which is July 28th, she posted on my Facebook. I looked it up because looking back now, it's just like she must have a direct line to God, because she said, "Happy birthday to our beautiful granddaughter. I feel like this year is going to be a special year for you." And so it was just wild because so the next week after that, I started noticing some cramping, which was pretty normal for me before I started my period. Um, and I wasn't sure, after the last cycle being so long, I had no idea when my period was actually going to start that next month. And so on my Natural Cycles app, I was just at home one day and working from home, and it said time to take a test or whatever. And I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm not doing this again. It
Yeah.
had been every month, we were like, okay, well. And then I felt like every time I went and took a test, I started my period that day, because that's, normally how it goes. But so I didn't, think anything of it. And then I was like, oh, what's it gonna hurt? I already have one in there. So I went and I took a test, and it was positive. And I sent Tori a message like immediately, because I had to tell somebody. And my husband was at work, and I didn't want to like call him or text him and tell him. So I'm now 23 weeks pregnant today. So the rise and source for the other month, I do
Yeah.
think made a difference. And that it was just, I mean, it was God's plan all along. I mean,
Absolutely.
it always is. But my grandma writing that on my Facebook,
Yes.
like it was just, and then literally that, like I was at that time. I mean, I tested positive like 6, 7 days later, whatever it was. So like at that point, I was probably already pregnant,
Yeah.
And then she wrote
That's
that,
really
and it was just,
cool.
yeah. So, and I did still get pregnant, even though I got in the hot tub. Like literally,
Mm-hmm.
that was the month. And so it's just like, you can't let, fear keep you from, doing the things you enjoy. So,
Amen. Amen. One thing I've been thinking about is, this is kind of like a marketing thing, but thinking about the way I speak to what it is like I teach and the way I do things. And it is like, how to improve your fertility, understanding your body, all that stuff. But I've been thinking about this phrase of creating a Christ and life first fertility routine. Because like you said, you guys could not keep doing what you were doing because the routine was too stressful. It was too much.
yeah.
And so, how do you create a routine where you're not giving up on your fertility? You're still working to improve your fertility, but you're living your life. You're getting in the hot tub on vacation. You're not stressing about, charting and those things. Because I feel like it's so extremely powerful, mindset wise and physically, to be like, okay, I trust God's timing. I know He has a plan for me, but also, faith without works is dead. So I'm going to do my part to improve my fertility, but I'm not going to let it overtake my life to where like we're just all unhappy.
Mm,
Like my husband's unhappy because I'm stressing him out. I'm unhappy because I'm hopeful 2 weeks and depressed the next two. Like how do we create this routine that is just a Christ and life first routine, which I feel is like what you stepped into
yeah.
last month before. So,
And a couple like just little extra tidbits is we had this guest speaker at a women's summit at our church, like probably March, April of this year, and she spoke on Moses's mom put where she puts him in the basket and sends him down the river or whatever. And so basically the point of the message was, and she ended up, getting to see him after that and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, what are you willing to put in the basket and send down the river and give it to God, and then if it's his will, you'll get to pick it back up. And if it's not, then you were obedient. And so
yeah.
at that time, like I felt like, okay, I'm supposed to put my fertility journey in this basket. Well, it just took me a little while to send it down the river because that was in like March, and
Yeah.
I was still, I felt like I was giving, God control, but I wasn't giving him full
Yeah.
control.
You put it in the
So,
basket, but then you were holding the
yeah,
basket and
yeah,
not letting the basket go.
yeah. And so, and something else that was just like small that happened was it was end of June, maybe early July, somewhere in there. I felt God telling me to pray over our nursery, like what we had planned would be our nursery. And that felt really dumb because I'm like, well, at the time it was Chase's room. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go in his room when he's not there and pray over it. And, and I was like, and, in my mind, I was like, oh, I can just pray about it right here. And I felt like, like I was being told to go into the room. And so I just, sat there and I wasn't in there for very long, but I just, prayed over the room and all that. And I felt I did it probably twice in like a 3 or 4 week span just because I felt in my spirit that that was something I was supposed to do, even though it felt silly at the time, but I did. And the room is now what will be the baby's nursery. And so it's just crazy to look back on those things, and it's like God knew what he was doing. He
Mm-hmm.
was just, working it all out in his
Yes.
timing. And I don't want to say testing me, but I mean a little bit. Like, are you willing to be obedient?
I think, and I have thought a lot recently about like hearing God's voice and that God will speak to us through other people. And so when we feel like God is silent and he's not talking to us and he's not here with us, that's something to do with us and our heart posture. Because if we take the time to slow down and quit trying to control things, and I call it white knuckling, if we quit trying to white knuckle things, like you're holding so hard your knuckles are
Yeah,
white, that he's speaking to us all the time. So even as you tell your story, I'm thinking, okay, the giveaway, you won that giveaway for a reason.
yeah,
Your grandma spoke that over you. You happen to go to this conference where this woman's saying, what are you willing to put in the basket? And it's your fertility journey that you need to put in the basket. And then you're prompted to pray over a room for a baby and you're not even pregnant. And that doesn't make any sense.
yeah,
So like there's four counts of God actively working in your story, which is easy to see now, like kind of looking back and maybe harder to see at the time.
yeah,
But if we really slow down and get quiet, we can see where he's working through people. I always say that God speaks to me in echoes, that I will hear something um, from different sources, like unrelated sources, like almost the exact same phrasing.
yeah,
And so, like an example, Lindsay, my wonderful online business manager, has been telling me for a while now. She's like, you need to let people see more of you, like who you are personally, like talk more about yourself. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 I don't want to do that. And so I've just kind of been ignoring that. And then Charlotte is another client that came in and she's doing some work for me now. So I've kind of brought her on board. She's doing something for me. And she didn't hear Lindsay say this. She doesn't know that Lindsay said anything. And Charlotte said the exact same thing, like, hey, I think you need to let people see you more. I'm like, no, I don't want to. But it's like that was the perfect echo from two very like wise people. We don't take wise counsel from just anybody, right? But these are two like very spirit-led people that have come into my life, not by chance, that said the exact same thing without knowing that the other one said that. And so it's like God's always talking to us. We just have to be quiet and listen. And that's just really cool to like recap your story and see like all the ways that God was like, all right, Bridget, I got you.
yeah.
Listen to
Also,
me.
also, Lindsay's amazing.
Yes.
She was very encouraging and supportive in the Facebook group. When one time, it was probably like 2 months maybe before I was pregnant, she was like, because she had gotten pregnant not
Mhm.
long before that. She's
She's due in February.
okay. I was like, I know she's due before. I couldn't remember how long. Okay,
Mhm.
so but she was like, "You're next, girl," and you're like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." And then like 2 months later, I got pregnant. I was like, "Oh, maybe Lindsay knew."
Mhm. Me and Lindsay do have these conversations. Like we talk about business stuff all the time because she helps me with so much. Um, but then sometimes we'll have these conversations about like, how are you feeling about so and so? And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel really like I really feel like something's happening with Bridget. So like
Yeah,
we're having these conversations in the background of like, I don't know. I really feel like Bridget might be next. Like it's just these inclinations.
yeah,
And a lot of time we're right, which is cool. I mean, we're not always right, but it's just a fun conversation. She was like, I feel it. I feel like
Yeah.
something's about to happen. I'm like, I agree. I think so too. So yeah, she is wonderful. And when you come into, so now the community aspect has been moved into the fruitful fertility method. But Lindsay is in that group and she's wonderful and a great inspiration and encouragement so that you have someone, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, kind of doing things with you and like so you don't feel so alone, which I think is really important. So yeah, that's so neat. So to wrap everything up, Bridget, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and tell us the one thing, if you could speak to the woman listening right now that was where you are, that is not pregnant, maybe she feels, like this is not going to happen for her. You said that too, like maybe this isn't meant for me. Maybe she feels like God's silent and she's just kind of down in the dumps. What would you, and just trying to get pregnant and not knowing why she's not pregnant, what is the one thing you would want her to take away from this episode or from your heart to hers?
Okay, so I already talked about just like the fertility journey, not living in fear because God calls us not to live in a spirit of fear. But something else that I believe is true in all areas of our life is when it's God's plan, nothing can stop it.
Amen.
Like no low vitamin levels, no trip out of town during your fertile window,
Yeah.
no, if you're but and I also believe he sees our obedience, so it's not saying, well, I'm not going to do anything because if it's God's plan, it'll happen. Those have to kind of coincide, like he will reward our obedience. I do believe that in all areas, not just
Yes.
fertility, but also like there is no roadblock that he cannot overcome. So I feel like that I was obedient in things that he was calling me to, even when they seemed insignificant. And that's not saying, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say that now because you got pregnant. Well, I was doing things, long before I got pregnant that I, felt like I was supposed to be doing all along. I was getting my steps in. I
Hmm.
was, I joined the course. I was taking the vitamins. We were doing, we were trying things.
Yes.
We were trying to find other avenues, to get to the end result that we were wanting to. But at the same time, like when God's in it, he's in it. So, and that timeline may look like a year, 2 years, 3 years, or it may be like our church is really big into fostering and adopting,
Mhm.
and we know a couple that they had been trying for years and they eventually had to use a surrogate, but now they have a baby, you know what I mean? So it's not all the same means,
Mhm.
to the end, but when God's in it, he's in it. So
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like obedience, I even feel like that's one of my words of the year for like 2026 is obedience. Because, like you said, it's not like you got pregnant overnight. You started walking steps back in February and March, and you didn't get pregnant till August or July or August. So it wasn't like you did one thing in July and everything changed. Like you were
yeah,
obedient for months and months and months. And even before that, because it was like, you were an advocate for yourself in your doctor's office. You got the labs drawn that you need to get drawn. You entered the giveaway, knowing that that might be a step for you. You started walking, you doing all the things. So there's a lot of obedience from the time you started trying till the time you got pregnant. And
yeah.
that's a really good reminder that I don't think anyone's brought up, or I have even said, not even feel like I'm like, oh, this is a podcast episode. I got to make a whole podcast episode on this.
And something else, my word for the year, because I do that sometimes,
Mhm.
this year was joy, and
Mm.
I actually had a screensaver on my phone that it's a scripture that's like, I will find joy in all circumstances or whatever. And let me tell you, for the first 6 months of the year, it was hard to find joy. Like,
Mm.
you take a test, it's negative, it's not your month, try again, but part of our struggle, on, just the whole process was that we lost like joy in the journey. We weren't enjoying spending time together. It became routine, it was just so, so that was something that was hard, that I felt challenged by, was just finding joy in the circumstances, because joy is not being happy. Joy is so much deeper than that. It's like finding reasons to, even when they seem dark. So that was something that challenged me a lot. And now I got to figure out a new word because it's almost a new year.
Yeah.
But
That is so true. I say all the time, I talk about vitamin J and like
yes, yeah,
is an important ingredient in the process. It really is. Because obedience is not always going to be fun, but joy can still be found.
yeah.
Yeah, so those are really good words. I'm over here making notes. I feel like you've given me so many good quotes. I feel like you just gave me like 3 podcast episodes just listening to you talk and share your story. So
And one quick last thing
yes.
is that I think Rise and Source is worth the investment. And I'm not saying that just because like that was kind of the thing that I started right before I got pregnant, but obviously it was easier than taking a bunch of pills.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed drinking it for the most part. And you know, it was something that I felt like does help. And if you're already taking 3 to 4 different kinds of pills, it's basically the same price, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was, yeah, it did. I stopped taking it when I got pregnant because I wasn't sure if I should still, you know, there was some stuff in it, which I had asked you about. And I think you said it was, you know, is on to ask my doctor, but, you thought it would be okay. But I just stopped taking everything I was taking other than my prenatal
Mm-hmm.
just
Simplify.
because, yeah. So, but I still have it, and I'm like, oh, well, is it still going to be good when I'm
Yeah.
not pregnant?
Make
I'm gonna
hubby
take
take
it.
it while
Yeah,
you're not taking it.
yeah. So I do think that I'm glad that I'm definitely glad that I did that. It made it simpler and less stressful because I'm like, okay, it's nighttime now. I gotta go
Mm-hmm.
swallow these 7 pills before I go to
Yes.
bed because I took mine at night. But so I do think that if you're on the fence about Rise and Source, that you should at least give it a try.
Yeah, that is great. That's a great word too. I have found I don't believe in like one size fits all. I think everybody's body is different and what they need is different. But the one thing that is not different is everybody needs minerals and everybody's nervous system is a hot mess.
Yeah,
Every person listening to this podcast right now, your nervous system is a hot mess. Ask me how I know mine is a hot mess too. But because Rise and Source, like focus on those 2 things, really all 3. I say the 3 buckets to improve fertility are nervous system, toxins, and minerals. And Rise and Source address all 3 of those. So no matter who you are, you benefit from that. Now, there are things like, you having your levels checked and seeing that you need more vitamin D, like that's where the personalization comes in. But even as I'm doing these hair tests and working with people, I'm like, if you just do Rise and Source, that would be like
yeah,
so beneficial. So I'm glad you said that because I truly believe they are phenomenal products, and I do see people getting pregnant on them with just that alone all the time.
mm,
And so it's a weird product, but I love it. And I
yeah.
think, it's really powerful. So I love that you said that.
And keep walking.
Yes.
I'm still walking. Yeah, like I said, I walk more now that I'm pregnant than I did before I got pregnant, I think. But it's just, it just makes you feel better. You know, everything's moving. But also like it's good for your health. It's good for your body. If you don't do anything else, walking.
Walking never goes out of style.
Yeah.
And those two, like Rise and Source paired with walking, I truly think that combination can get people pregnant.
Yeah.
That combination alone can get people pregnant because it's that good. Like the minerals and the adaptogens for your nervous system, and walking is your nervous system, blood sugars, lymphatic drainage, like all of it, So it really is. It's a very powerful combo.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Bridgette, for sharing all your wisdom and your story with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode touched your heart or taught you something, I'd be honored if you share it with a friend who could use the information too. And if you want to be the real MVP, then would you also take 30 seconds to tap those 5 stars at the bottom and leave a written review telling me what you're loving? It lights me up to know this podcast is really helping you. Don't forget, you're super cute and super fertile, so meet me back here next week and let's keep chatting and learning together.